Welcome back to Inside Iraq. Today we are discussing how concerned are the Gulf countries about what is going on in Iraq and what the future holds for them, with Ghassan Al-Atiyah, Hassan Al-Ansari and Michael Hudson. To what extent concern about energy and money and being at the center of this globalization is affecting perhaps some of the decisions made by the rulers of these countries?
I think this is a valid point. If you take the example of Dubai, there is more than 500 billion Iranian investment in Dubai itself. The Iranians have so much stake in the stability of the Gulf, but at the same time, they can use destabilizing the whole area as a shield or a protection from an American military invasion. In this sense, now we are playing brinkmanship. Where shall we stop? No one has interest in military confrontation in this area. The Gulf States before anybody else. They don't want war because in that case the collateral damage will be paid by the Gulf states. On the other hand, the Iranian and the American, to bring them to the table to negotiate, you have to create a situation, an atmosphere where each side will feel he is a winner. Otherwise, if any party will feel he's a loser, each one of them will try to use his own ploy to make the other feel weaker.
Well, you know, there are some people in Washington, influential people, who think that perhaps a military raid on Iran really would not be such a bad idea. The neoconservatives are still powerful in Washington, not as powerful as they used to be, but they're still there. And there is a strong argument being made in conservative circles that the real threat from an American point of view in the Gulf is not Iraq. Iraq is just a mess. But Iran is a real potential danger, and something needs to be done about it. And if diplomacy won't work, there are still people that are ready to beat the drums and say that an American raid on Iraqi nuclear and military facilities is going to have to happen sooner or later. Now that is something I think that would keep people awake at night on the Arab side of the Gulf.
Hassan Al-Ansari, when the drumbeats of war were striking very hard just perhaps about a year ago or less than a year ago, the former commander of the Iran Revolutionary Force said, if that is to happen, if somebody is going to strike Iran, we will burn the region. Burn the region, I mean, we are talking about a very short distance. We can imagine hundreds, if perhaps several hundreds of missiles flying into this region, whether it's Dubai, whether it's the eastern shore of Saudi Arabia, whether even the military base in Qatar.
Yeah, we are worried about that, but you know, Jassim, you have to understand that at the end, the decision of the war is not in our hand. We are concerned, we live in this part of the world, but at the end, we are not the one who's going to make the decision about
You feel impotent, you cannot influence the decision by whether Iran or by the US?
We are trying, that's why we are talking to Iran about this situation. But Iran has to understand that even if Iran, you know, extended its influence into Iraq, that doesn't guarantee that Iran will be a dominant force in this part of the world. You know, at one point, the Gulf state, you know, faced at one point, you know, Iran and Iraq, with the help of the Western power, you know, they couldn't influence, you know, the Gulf states at the end. And I don't think, you know, the United States or the West will just leave, you know, all this sorts of energy in this part of the world for Iran or anybody else to be dominated this. So this has to be in the Iranian minds. So the Iranians, as Dr. Ghassan said, at the end, they have a big stakes and they have to make a decision. They are the major power in this part of the world. If they don't think that the Gulf is big for everybody, including Iran, then, you know, they are in trouble. Now,
this is what is noticeable. For the first time, when you have a real crisis, acute crisis, concentration of the mind begins. For the first time, we see Kuwaiti head of state and foreign ministers, Qatari, Emirat, Saudis, they go to Tehran. They talk with the Tehran. Then the Iranian reciprocated. The president came to Saudi Arabia and to the Emirate and other places. They came to make sure to convince the Gulf that we don't mean any harm to you. But, however, diplomacy talking is something, but you need concrete things. With the Iranian, the files that under consideration are not only Iraq. For the Iranian, there is nuclear fire. For the others, there is Palestine. For the other, there is Lebanon. Then comes Syria. Then come the dispute about the island.
These are all sub-files, Ghassan.
No,
the major file for Iran is the domination of this area, the hegemony, and more importantly, to kick the United States out of this region. This is a declared policy, Michael Hudson. In light of this, what they are trying to achieve, and that is to have their influence all the way to the Mediterranean and somehow affect some sort of an Arab-Israeli resolution to this. Do you see in the horizon in the next 4, 5, 6 years, somehow there is a confrontation coming up with Washington?
Well, I think, first of all, I think that the Gulf states, it's all very well for them to go to talk to Tehran to make them be nicer. But you should also be talking to Washington, because there are important congressmen and politicians in Washington who still think that the people in the Gulf really do fear Iran, and they really do want the Americans to protect them, even militarily if necessary. When President Bush came out here some time ago, he conveyed in a very tough speech what he said is the Iranian threat to you people. So, you know, we will help you, he said. Now, of course, we're hearing different messages, but I think you cannot expect any major change in American policy until a new administration comes in, and one can only hope that when that happens, if it's a Democrat, as I hope it will be, that they will re-examine the whole Middle East file from Palestine to Afghanistan and try to set us on a better track.
Michael Hudson, before Ghassan jumps in, could you comment on what Cheney said? He said, worse than a war with Iran is a nuclear Iran. Is that a summary of the establishment within the U.S.?
That is a summary of the viewpoint that Mr. Cheney represents, and Mr. Cheney is arguably still the most powerful leader in Washington. So the answer is yes.
In a way, I heard it from several sources. Don't be surprised that Mr. Bush, before he leaves office, he strikes Iran. I heard it from different sources. But all this, we have to ask.
That's very unlikely, because it needs an authorization by Congress.
Yes, not only
and
that.
the Democrats control
No, it doesn't.
It could happen.
No, it could happen. Without authorization. It's not declaring war. He will consider
create a
self-defense.
Gulf of Tonkin incident?
No, but this is what they say. But I will see. Sanity could prevail and must prevail.
On both sides?
On both sides, definitely. Now, the question is, no one is showing really his cards.
Michael Hudson?
I think that you have to wait for a new administration.
I agree with that.
A new administration from another party might go back to the grand bargain that the Iranians offered some years ago now and say, well, let's take a new look at that we don't have the burdens of the past administration. But we still have a good many months to go before our election and before a new administration comes into power. And I think these are very dangerous months.
By the way, what's happening now in Iraq with clashes in the south, partly is jockeying for position. While the American trying to clip the wings of the Iranian in South Iraq, the Iranian, aware of this, they will try to make trouble to the American, and they are hitting the green zone.
Hassan Al-Ansari, I started with you. Let me finish with you. 5 years after the invasion, and we have seen the horrible scenario from March 2003 until now. With the benefit of hindsight, would Gulf countries would have been much better off with the regime staying contained in that box, or these powerful destructive forces unleashed and somehow in the future is going to dissipate and Iraq will return into normalcy?
I think, after all of this things that we are witnessing in Iraq, I think many people in this part of the world wishes that the situation could have been solved differently with the old regimes. But that doesn't mean that now I mean we are wishing about
That's
something.
That's a lot of water under the bridge. Let me take a final comment from Michael Hudson and Ghassan Atiyah. Go ahead, Michael.
Well, I'm afraid, yes, we have to live with the world that we have made, and we've made a rather mess of things, I'm afraid, in Iraq. But I think that, as I said before, you're not going to see a big mind change on the part of this administration in its waning months. What I worry about is the possibility of an accident. For example, if many missiles hit the green zone and kill important American diplomats or generals, or suppose an Iranian missile boat hits an American warship in the Gulf. Under the circumstances, a low-level conflict, which is what the Iranians want,
into even a bigger one.
It might indeed.
Hassan Atiyah, final comment from you. Madeleine Albright called the misadventure in Iraq the biggest mistake the United States committed since the creation of the Republic. How would you put it?
I would say the United States made a blunder, but my guess, with the new administration, the American usually, as once Churchill said, they will do all the wrong things until they do the right thing.
Hassan Al-Atiyah, Director of Iraqi Foundation for Development and Democracy. Hassan Al-Ansari, Editor-in-Chief of Qatar Tribune. Michael Hudson, Director of Center for Contemporary Arab Studies in Georgetown University. Gentlemen, thank you for being guests on Inside Iraq. To access the show and to send us your comments, please go to aljazeera.net/English. That's all the time we have for this week. Join me next week when we take another look inside Iraq. Goodbye.